The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. We're in October, which means that we've got November coming up. And then November is our last live audience recording of the year. It's always surprising to me because this is our 95th episode together, talking about all things Agile. And just the fact that we're almost through the year. Some of it feels good. Some of it feels like 2024 for a number of people was a year of blossoming, and others, like with the recent layoffs that just occurred, specifically because as people know my history, I came from Intel Corporation. They just went through a devastating set of layoffs. And we did a whole episode talking about that. I'm not going to go dig deep into that. I just want to reach out because I know there was a few people as I was chatting with them online. This is a stressful time. You're going into the holidays and you're thinking about what's next. Best advice is take an assessment of where you're at and really look at and understand what you want that next chapter to be. If Intel is anything like it used to be, they probably gave at least a decent enough package where you can breathe a little bit, not have to worry about medical insurance and all those things for several months. And if you've been there for a long time, maybe even longer than that. So just lean into your network. Understand that there are people here that are ready to support you. At any time, by the way, you guys can reach out to me on LinkedIn or even on my site, New Agility, and set up a meeting. Have a chat with me. I'd love to hear if you need some help getting perspective. We're here for you on this. If this is your first time coming to the Agile Coaching Network, we are a sponsored show. We are a group of Agile coaches who have been doing coaching for a long period of time. And we've been actually supported by our sponsors as well as the members of New Agility. So if you want to take the time, if you're a listener to the podcast, we would appreciate if you feel like, because we are coming into the giving season, every little dollar helps us in order to pay for the podcasting services and all of the other stuff that it takes to go put on this show. So go over to acnpodcast.org, go take a look there, and there's a donation. If you want to do a one-time donation, please. If you want to become a full-blown sponsor, we'd love to have you, as well as become a supporting member of the show. I'm joined every month by a set of really cool co-hosts. And I've been lucky enough that they've been with me for years, and they provide a lot of the insight. The format of this show is that we have a kickoff set of questions, and then we start to talk about that. And they are to help to get the conversation started. This is a great community. Agile community is probably the best community that I've been a part of for several decades now. And let's amplify our learning and really just have a really great time tonight. Well, we had an episode earlier in the year talking about the potential of displacement of humans and AI. And in particular, as AI becomes more prevalent in systems, there were some CEOs way back when that said, hey, I can now save money by not having as many employees. And so we did a whole episode on that one. What I was thinking about, because I was watching some of the people in the Agile test community really taking advantage and leaning into what are the big core benefits of what AI can produce for their test community. In particular, testing is the dark art sometimes, but it's a mountain of data that needs to be, plowed through in order to understand, anything like test coverage. Are we doing well? Is this thing ready to ship? From quality assurance perspective, there's just the data has shifted from the manual tester of the prior decades to now huge amounts of data analysis and understanding whether or not what we've done so far is enough. And that includes not just in the traditional QA space, but also in what we do in DevOps, in the DevOps space of saying, is this package ready to go? Or have we adequately satisfied the things that are necessary for that. And so AI, if I just think of the Agile principles in general, it does help in a number of ways in order to help us to live the Agile principles. Customer collaboration, over contract negotiations, if you think about the way that customer insights, and I just recently took a group of about 1,000 stories about a product, and I threw it through an AI engine and it spit out what the common themes were inside of it, which is pretty good because it actually came up with exemplar stories and things that can actually turn into requirements with high customer value. Really, if I had to think about doing that work before, was a huge ton amount of work in order to go do it. And this thing did this in less than a few minutes. If you think of responding to change over following plans, predictive analytics are something that is emerging now today. We already talked about the testing tools, about working in high value software. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, Agile is about working product and shipping working product. If you think of also just in the standpoint of just sustainable development, how can we look at I remember doing analysis of happy faces and sad faces, trying to read the minds of our developers to see if we were overloading them. How about more front-end analysis to know that's too many requirements and we don't have enough people to do that? And then combinations of those tools can help us to do better planning with the work that we're doing. The last component and the benefit, and if you are a coder, you know that things like Copilot and ChatGPT and all of the others, that thing will clean up and write code. It will comment my code for me. If you think about having good, refined, and tight code, these systems do really well about taking a code block and going ahead and refactoring it and doing a fairly decent job. In all cases, by the way, all of this still requires the human in the system and really the smart human in the system, because if you were to do this work and then get an answer back from an AI system, you still have to have the smart people on the other side to go, hey, the thing hasn't hallucinated and created something wrong. So on the opposite side of this, how potentially doesn't it support the Agile values and principles? One is if you think about just fundamentally, and maybe we've outgrown this, an overemphasis on tools and processes, because AI systems create another layer of tools and processes within the system. Inflexibility due to the model. Trusting the model more than the humans could also be a huge issue. And then the old term garbage in, garbage out, which is potential bias and misleading decisions that come out of these systems that might be totally wrong. It could be a hallucination. It could be also the fact that the data that was trained on was biased. I think there was a report about, and this is more in law enforcement space, but if you train the model to look at a particular demographic and all you fed it was certain crime data that was based upon, say, a Black community, these systems might get biased to think that, okay, if I'm looking for the criminal and with the AI image system, it could have been trained to where it was more leaning towards looking at basically race bias being brought into it. So you got to be real careful on the data that's in there. And in the case of what we do in software development and customer data, we might just get too homogeneous with the types of products that are being released because the AI system is basically too narrow. So innovation could be stifled. So with that, the questions to kick everything off, and sorry if that was a little bit long-winded, but I felt that I needed to have kind of a wind-up about what I was thinking about with the subject. How does AI today help your teams? And how are you using them today in a way that's enhanced your ability to deliver great products? The next one is, what are some ways that you feel that it's taken away from the Agile values and principles from your perspective? Where do you feel like this is either forcing a rewrite of the values and principles, or it's moving us further away from the customer-centric, people-centric type of thing that we've been trying to build for the last couple decades? And a bonus question, what do you feel that your biggest challenge moving forward with AI is? What do you see as that big hindrance that might be building with this? To get us started, Jorg, do you want to take a perspective on this?
Yeah, sure. Definitely several ways. And I would say the most agile one is actually opening up perspectives. You have a look at something, you're not sure how to do it, or you can just put in, do you have a better or alternative way of solving my problem? It's really used as a learning starter. And I think this depends on the mindset with which you approach work in general. If you're really looking for a best or reasonably attractive solution, or if you just want to get things done. And I think that is a big thing that AI currently can do for us. We can just, with our own appreciation of what is good, come to a better solution without investing more effort. I think this is very attractive to the engineer, as you're always looking for something really good to get out of there. And in addition, especially with regard to the testing space, it takes away the manual labor, where you never would do a lot of variations manually on testing, at least not with great joy. You now can just say, fill this up with any kind of pattern. And actually, even if one of those patterns is really not giving you something, then you can throw it away after the first failed test. And maybe even that tells you again something about your system. It's much more generating ideas and different perspectives for people at the moment than it's really doing hard or, let's say, intelligent work. That is definitely the point. In terms of processes and principles, I personally don't yet see it used a lot. So this is still something where it's not replacing the human interaction at the moment. But definitely I see your risk as well, that we're going to be extremely biased towards what has been marketed well, because that is what's happening in a lot of places. If you have things where you have a lot of content coming from marketing things and sales initiatives, you have the challenge that you have when you're looking for consulting support as well. Are people going to sell you something, or are they going to solve your solution, your problem? Sorry for that. And I think that is something where we have to be extremely sensitive not to fall for the fancy things, because what's well marketed as well looks more fancy, and in bringing it all together, this probably will outweigh a lot of other stuff. Being constructively skeptical is probably what we need in the future. And I think in a way, the customer value probably changes a bit from the, let's say, making use of your product good in terms of finding the biases, miscalculations that come up with more automation in the future. So that is what probably is a bit the future challenge, and where we need to find some rational ways, because a lot of people who are far away from technology will look at this and say, AI told me, and this might not be pretty, depending on how it works.
Could be the possibility that you don't know it was generated by AI, which is always a challenge. Yes, curious from the European perspective, because you're over in Germany. Do you think that there's a difference between the way that the US perceives this as a tool versus what's happening in Europe?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can speak for the entire continent, but at least for what I'm seeing in Germany, there is a lot of concern about data privacy, these kind of things, data security for the company, and maybe a general mistrust on some people. But there's as well the openness and curiosity as well. But as we have strong workers' councils and stuff, sometimes there is the effect that we have to really regulate first what is possible and allowed to do before even understanding what we're doing or what the possibilities are. So a lot of people come from their private learning to roll it out to the company, because then they can say, yeah, I did it personally, so I can really tell you what it's about, and not waiting for the full regulation. So that is maybe different, but I don't think, especially on the personal level, there's a big difference. More on the bureaucratic view, if you bring people together in a legally responsible organization, then probably be more cautious.
Okay, thank you for that. Diana, how are you? You're in Europe right now, aren't you?
And I was just at a conference yesterday. I was keynoted for a conference. Oddly enough, I did not speak to the conference theme, which was AI and Agile. There were several talks. We went to a couple ones. Yeah, George and Hesselberg, who we both know. I'm really tired, so my voice is shot. I did
That's
the
okay.
keynote yesterday, and then today I was did a workshop all day. If I make no sense, I have an excuse. Jorgen did a wonderful talk. I wish if I had known this was going to be the topic of the coaching network today, I would have listened more carefully. But he did a wonderful job, and he's not the first person that I have seen do this pros and cons. Here are the advantages. Here are the disadvantages. And when we're talking about AI in terms of the large language models, which seems to be the biggest part of the conversation right now, although I'm as interested, if not more interested, in manufacturing, automation, kinds of things. And there's a lot out there in the field of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is some of it that I think we've narrowed down to a conversation just about large language models at this point. And so I think we're not doing it a service. But one of the things that Jorgen brought up was Amara, the quote from, I think his name was Ray Amara, who is the person who said, whenever we're thinking about the future, we tend to over-predict the short term and under-predict the long term. And so I've been thinking a lot of other technology introductions that have come along and that at first many of us were shaking our heads about and saying, really, do we really need that? What's going on? How is that's not going to go anywhere good. And then the technology, the using of the technology begins to adjust the nature of the technology until we figure out how to make it useful. The iPod, which at first that wheel that we had to use to get into our music and those kinds of things, became the iPhone. And the iPhone has turned out to be pretty useful and continues to get adjustments and updates and so on to respond to what people really need. And you can think of a lot of similar examples to that. So I think that's what's going to happen with AI. My curiosity is, how long is it going to take? And I'm not working directly with any development teams right now, so I'm not engaged with people who are using it for programming or some of those other delivery uses. And so mostly what I'm seeing is marketing and advertising uses, which just sends shivers up my spine, because it feels to me that the uncanny valley of all the images and things are, if you're paying attention, are pretty easy to spot. Jordan did a great one where he talked about some experiment where someone asked AI to make images, one of the AIs to make images of Vikings. And the Vikings that it came up with were just hysterically funny. They were somewhere in its prompt along the way, it had been asked to make sure that diversity and inclusion were included. And so it ended up with Vikings from the middle of Africa and Vikings from the American indigenous population. And they all looked very buff and like science fiction book covers. Yeah, we're still in that place where where hobbyists are playing around with it. They are one of the groups that always helps things to improve because they experiment as like testers. They experiment a lot of different ways. They explore it. They figure out what it can do and what it can't, and they have a lot of fun with it. And so that's mostly what I'm paying attention to right now. I got burned early on after ChatGPT 3.5 came on the scene with, and I told this story before, so I won't go into it, but being misrepresented by somebody who tried to write an article purely through AI. And I somehow got included in it and was misrepresented. My initial impression was not great because of that. But as time goes by, I'm seeing more uses for being able to write things without starting from a blank page, just asking for some prompts that will prompt me. And I think what you and your both said about we have to be good. We need to not be asking questions of AI that we know nothing about the topic, because we cannot then tell when it's hallucinating things and when it's giving us really good, useful prompts.
Right. And I actually loaded a desktop model of an earlier AI model. There's something called Olama that you can actually run the model locally. And I'm doing this for home automation stuff. But I asked the earlier model, who is Ray Arel? And it came back and I said it needs more context. And so I said, who's Ray Arel from the Agile community? And it says, Rel worked with Jeff Sutherland in the early days to create Scrum, and went on and on. And it's just, I did? Really?
Ooh, in your alternate history.
In my alternate history and the hallucination of this AI model. So I fully agree with you on that. And hopefully on that conference that you were at, hopefully they post some of that online. I'd love to see your keynote.
I think they were recording most of the sessions, and both my keynote, and they had several invited speakers, and Jorgen was one of them. So I suspect even if all the sessions get recorded, that one will have been. And I thought it was quite cool.
Awesome.
I don't know how long it'll take for them to come online. It's Agile Turkey Summit is the name of the conference.
Cool. I'm absolutely certain that your talk was great. So having seen you speak over the years, always a privilege to be able to sit in the audience with you. No, you're up on stage. I'm not in the audience with you. I'm in the audience. Anyway.
You're getting a little AI there.
I am. I'm hallucinating a little bit, but we only normally see each other in Europe and other countries, not in Portland. Scott, you got your hand up. What do you have on this?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really have found, especially I use ChatGPT mostly. I haven't really tried many of the other ones. But again, knowing something about the subject and be able to go somewhere to get some ideas of things that you might not have thought about is very powerful. And because of that, I use it quite a bit to help give a more complete answer when I'm thinking about things. So yeah, I'll know something and I can talk about it. And then I go to ChatGPT and find that, oh, I didn't really think about this and this. That's interesting. And you can add that. And that's really the power. Diane, I think, was talking about that. If your topic, that can be very useful. If you don't know anything about what you're querying, and you then base your decisions off of that, that can be a very dangerous thing. And that's where my worry in the future is, where I'm thinking about it. As more and more people start to use these tools, if you make decisions on something from ChatGPT or any of these other tools, if you don't know the topic, then it could be very dangerous in that scenario. But otherwise, I've been using it myself and my teams. When questions come up, I'll think about what I think the answer is, and then I'll go out to ChatGPT, ask it the same question. And almost every time I'll get a more complete thought out of ChatGPT on things that I didn't think about, that I can then craft my answer. And I'm learning as I go based on these other things that I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that point or this point. Anyways, that's my thoughts on that.
No, I think that's really good. And back to just the whole understanding what comes out of the machine, I think everyone should be skeptical about any of the answers that come from it that doesn't have a model that was specifically trained for the scenario that you're doing. But even then, it could be biased. So you got to be incredibly careful with that. I just as a cutesy thing on my home automation system, I actually told the AI system to read back the responses as if it was Harry Potter. And surprisingly enough, It was casting spells and turning on lights, which was fun. I don't know how useful that is. But one thing that, and to your point though, Scott, on this was how you set up the prompt, meaning explain it. Sometimes if you've been in your career for a long period of time, you miss some details and you gloss it over because you've been talking about it so much, or you think everyone knows that. So actually saying, explain this to a college student or explain this to an intern as a prompt added to it does wonders to go pull out more detail of things that we take for granted because we've been doing it for a long period of time. Cool stuff. Shauna, hey, how's it going?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Or afternoon or evening for whoever is on with us. Yeah, so I'm going to take this in a little bit of a different direction. I really like what Jorg was saying in terms of human connection. If we look at the very first item on the Agile Manifesto, which is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We just sit with that for a second. I think the goal for a lot of us is that engagement, getting our teams to work better together, getting us to figure out that human connection. And AI really allows us to do things like work faster, create automation, come up with better processes. But I think especially because AI and remote work came up together, what I really started to see was the spirit of Agile, that human connection and collaboration. Everybody just became more and more embedded into their screens and into their processes and into the tools, the AI tools that have been given to us. So one thing that's really important for me and my teams is to utilize AI as a generative way to think about workshops, team building exercises, how to create those deeper connections with my teams. I think that using tools like ChatGPT as a way to come up with ideas on how to engage teams or personalize learning for the challenges that your team has, facilitate different ways of knowledge sharing across remote environments is a great way to use the tools in order to really promote that in individuals and interactions. And do think that getting faster, becoming more lean, and using automation, those are all very important. But I think that if we can continue to utilize AI in a way that brings teams closer together, look at the well-being of our teams, look at how we want them to grow and to work better together, what are ways that we can do that? We can still use the automation tools maybe as a way to flag potential, here's all the things that my team's going, can you help me flag some potential burnout risks? Can you help me think about ways that we can balance our workload a little bit better across teams? I think that finding ways to utilize AI as a way to enhance the human connections, and that's really what I like to do when I'm using it, instead of just a way for us to build in more processes, more tools to get us to work faster.
I like that. Along those lines, and I think you're familiar with this, but I've also been collecting stories from the Agile community, doing sense making. One of the biggest challenges with that is to go find what is the core story that might be the biggest impediment that might be sitting out there. And again, from a data analysis, being able to submit that story data and then say, find me the exemplar story that represents what's going wrong here. And then to that next step, which is give me 5 suggestions of how I can go correct this. And it's surprising, it does come up with some decent ways of approaching that. Mm-hmm. And I think the challenge, and help me with this part of it, as when we customize and do, I never go do a workshop where it's like just my straight deck. It's always customized. How does that impact your workload? Does that make it more or does it make it less? Because you're now having to go tailor, say, a workshop for an individual group.
I think that I am definitely in the camp that it's sped up my ability to do things like put out a tailored or customized message or deck or any of those things. Like it's because I'm able to just throw my raw ideas or my raw notes and having it come back in a way that packages it, finds patterns across for me to touch on. Yes, it's definitely by tenfold sped up the ability for me to do that.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, because this is the shift in the way we work. How would you have done that before? Would that have been a group of people that got together to go do that? Or would it be you for hours mulling over it?
I guess it's a combination of both. We've had to adapt in remote environments where normally you could pull together 5 or 6 people and brainstorm. I still think that brainstorming activity is necessary to diverge, to figure out all of the ideas, think through all of the things we want to think about. But when you are lacking that or you don't have that partnership, in my mind, that comes first. But sometimes you just need a way to generate ideas, and you can definitely use AI to do that.
Okay. And let me ask the final question. I don't mean to pick on you.
That's okay.
So what's your guardrail then? So if you think of human interactions, I know you personally, and I know that the fact that you value those really heavily. What's the guardrail that you put in your head when you might be pulling away from that? What is the thing that you do that brings you back to human interaction space?
So I think in the way that I've shifted is I haven't moved away from human interaction. Just part of how I work is I need to be able to I verbally think out ideas as I have to talk it through with somebody. However, what I have started doing is instead of just presenting sort of my raw thoughts to a group, or I'm finding it easier to have a rough draft or a straw person idea in order to say, hey, I've put my ideas. Can we use this as a starting point and think through it? That has helped me is coming up with that straw person or that first draft so that we're not working from a blank slate. But whether Diana mentioned, whether that's a single person doing that or a group of people, the ability to have a starting point has definitely helped maneuver through some of these conversations.
Thank you for that. Valerie, you said that you had a blog post that you did on Agile coaching and AI. I'd love to hear what your perspective is on this topic.
Thank you, Ryan. As I'm looking at my LinkedIn post, it's been over a year. I was just like trying to refresh my memory. But I'll say my biggest takeaway that I can remember was what I've been hearing from the other speakers is that using AI as a tool to come up with some creative thinking with ideas that maybe those that are part of the collaborative group, okay, AI is bringing in some additional thoughts that we can take into consideration and move forward with. So I've always seen the positive side of using AI as an agile coach, but I can also see that there could be a negative perspective of it too. If you're, I guess I would say, exploiting it to where you're becoming lazy about it and letting it do your job. And then especially to the point that Diana was talking about, and then you too, right, about the hallucination side. But I do appreciate that they have courses out here, or not per se courses, but making sure, and I'll try to scroll really quick so I could say it correctly, but where you make sure AI is being ethical, if that makes sense, with its algorithms and so forth. So making sure that it's not being biased and being aware that, especially if you're a part of a development group as a, say, Scrum Master, product owner, having your eyes and ears open to make sure that the product or software is not being programmed to be unethical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's vital. I think that's where the group mindset needs to be brought back in, which is any product that comes from an AI-based system, it really needs to go through. That question needs to be asked, and as it's demoed and as people look at it, does it in fact not contain those biases inside of it? And that I still think is just a human thing. I think it's still just a group of humans getting together for that. Well, I appreciate your perspective on it. Sheila, how are you?
Okay, I haven't really worked with AI much, or really at all, but I've been looking at it. And like a few days ago, I was trying to do something using AI and it kept timing out. So I'm not sure. And it was a tool I'd used before that had not been problematic. So I don't know why that changed. I'm thinking about things though. In the past, forget about AI. I've had managers and business users who didn't want to talk to me because won't the system know what to do when I'm the one that's trying to help them get a system to do this? I think that will probably be much worse with AI. And the other facet of that is that usually when business users talk about what their needs are and talk about the user stories that they're expecting, they're operating within a set of constraints that they don't even realize they have because they're thinking about their current business process and their current system, even if it's convoluted and it was jury-rigged together as the business changed and it doesn't really meet their needs. And that's why they want a new system. But what they're saying that they expect will usually be constrained by what they already have. So if you're getting AI if you're putting what you described, Ray, where you're putting in a bunch of different user stories to get some commonality, I worry that you'd already have those constraints built in. And in both of those cases where I'm talking about managers who don't understand that there still needs to be human interaction, which is what Shauna was talking about, and with what the expectations of the people that are providing the requirements, I worry that their expectations are going to be unrealistic in terms of what can be accomplished in what time frame and what the quality is going to be if you don't have the human interactions and don't really have actual analysis by human beings who are going to think through more than the system. I don't think that AI is smart enough to think about things that are not obvious. I may be wrong. That's my impression.
I like that one of your first usages is it timed out.
Yeah.
That's classic. And by the way, that's that dependency thing, right? Because sometimes these systems are offline. And then if nobody knows how to do this stuff manually, then what do you do?
It wasn't just one thing that timed out. I tried a few different things because I was thinking, okay, that one didn't work. Let me try this. Everything I tried was timing out. And I'm thinking about things like predictive text on my phone. It's gotten so bad that I'm ready to turn off autocorrect because I'm having to go back and correct everything that it says. And then it makes more changes on the fly when I hit send. And it's useless. It's getting there anyway. And I think that's similar to what happens with AI in general, because that's really AI.
Yeah, the older models, they do have their challenges. I won't mention the name of my connected device that's sitting on my desk because it will answer. But I have fought with that connected device so many times. I just wanted to add something to my shopping list. That was it. I was like, you made this very hard. I could have typed it in sooner.
Yeah, I just tell them to go away when they or say goodbye.
Yeah, I think I say something a little bit less politically correct when it comes to it. And when you start to cuss at your connected device, then you know that there might be, I don't know, maybe I need some therapy there. I do have to say that, though, that what I've seen, though, in the models has changed drastically. Again, my current project that I'm working on is a home assistant for my automation system at home. And I gave it the prompt of, I'm developing film in my basement. Could you set the lighting level correctly? And no lie, that's the only thing I gave it. And it turned, because I have RGB lights in the room. It turned them red and turned the lights down. And I was just like shocked that it interpreted the environment and then based upon what it knew about how to develop film, it did that. And so I'm getting a little bit amazed and also a little bit scared from that perspective. Let's see. Gina, I just activated your microphone and you said something very interesting on the chat about that you don't trust companies that don't set guidelines for AI use. Could you expand on that?
Hi, good afternoon. Was there a breach recently? I forget who, but the personal information of their customers was put on AI. So general guidelines, yes, you can use it to generate a document but make sure you scrub your data first. Or what is allowed to be done using AI, or specifically something like ChatGPT in your work environment, especially if you're using your work device. And I'm not aware of standard guidelines that any companies are using. Maybe you are, but I think things like that would be very helpful.
Oh, I do not disagree with you on that. We all hate reading the terms and conditions on stuff that we use, but please read the terms and conditions of ChatGPT. There are settings in there that says that you want it to not store your data and use it for other purposes, which, by the way, brings up when I think, Valerie, when you were talking about ethics, or the ethical environment is, and I hate to say this, is that I've posted a lot of articles over the years, and I know that part of me is inside of ChatGPT. I don't know how it munged it, and maybe the ideas were similar to other people's ideas, but I know it exists in there because if I look at the latest model, if I do ask it who I am, it actually comes back and has a fairly good bio of me, which is scary as well. So when you said, though, those guidelines, I think those are really important. And if the chat is not on your local prim and it's going out to the outside world, then you really need to be careful with that. And Valerie, you had another thing on the chat too. What was your point on that one?
I was just sharing some of my learned information about this book I'm reading called Nexus. And I haven't finished it, but I'm getting into it. It's interesting. They start from a historical point of view of how man has interacted with each other and how the cultures and religions have influenced and guided our mindsets. And now it's getting into the point of how AI and technology and computers, they're being programmed basically to adopt the ways humans have, I don't want to say control, but I guess for lack of words, control how us as humans have been adopting different types of cultures. And so the scariest part that I was emphasizing in the chat was when it gets to the point where it's computers without the interaction of humans. And to me, that's a very scary thought. And I feel like it's a very realistic situation that can happen.
It's actually occurring now. I think one of the challenges that I heard from an AI engineer is that there is so much AI generated content that's not attributed to an AI system that's now on the web. As the model is training, as it pulls in more of the internet, it's eating itself. So there is a little bit of that that's taking place with the whole systems today. And to be honest with you, that's a complex problem that they're going to have to go work out because there's a lot of people who just don't put that the entire article was an AI article. I read some things on news sites and I go, that's AI. It just feels AI. It doesn't even feel like there was a human behind the source of it. Mm-hmm. But then it gets pulled back through and gets put into the training model, which is not good. Tammy, you said you're 50-50 on the whole thing. I'm curious your perspective. Do you want to, I turned on your microphone. Do you mind telling me why you're 50-50? Tammy Murray, are you there?
Yep, I am. Oh, I was it was to your previous questions about do you trust AI for their work? And I've got some pretty good results, but then probably the same amount of time I get pretty bad results. I don't trust it necessarily 100%, but it'll often get me started or I'll know I need to look somewhere else.
Okay. So in your work itself, what do you do in your day job, if you don't mind me asking?
That's okay. I'm an Agile coach.
And I often use it for trying to wordsmith training documents or knowledge articles or things like that. And yeah, there's been a few things where I'm like, that is not best practice. Where are you getting this? And I've argued with it. Other times it's, oh yeah, for example, create a persona for this type of user. And it's done very well on that.
Along those lines, for anyone who uses the image tools on ChatGPT, I fight with that because I've tried using it and it's just, it wants to put birds in the picture. And I don't want a bird in that picture. I tell it, don't put a bird in that picture. And I said the correct spelling too, because it always spells wrong.
Mine wants Latin in the middle of my infographics.
Yeah, I don't want that. I'm sorry. But you'd fight with it and it would still give you 4 more pictures with the same Latin and the same bird and the same thing. And this, what are you doing? What do you think? Do you think Agile coaches can be replaced by, and this is a question for you and everyone else, can they be just replaced by a chatbot?
Not yet. Chat is still learning, but I think companies are trying to, I don't know. It'll be a full cycle. I think that they'll think that a coach can be replaced, but then they'll find out that the generic responses may not work for their organization or that it's picking up misinformation.
Oh, okay. So it might be giving bad advice. Some of it's simple, which is a team of 7 and plus or minus 2. It's a simple response for what is a team.
Yeah. Just the other day, I wanted to see what ChatGPT or a like program would say a BA's role in a Scrum team. And it gave a very confident best answer that it is part of the Scrum team and this is their role. And I'm like, yeah, really? Why is that a best practice and where's your source? And they didn't have any sources. The ChatGPT couldn't give me any sources. So that's the type of misinformation that it's picked up and it's, quote, learned, but it can't back it up.
Which is troubling. And what I found is the plagiarism tools that you can throw your work through just to make sure that you didn't exactly remember a quote from a book or someone else's work. And it's interesting that it does pick up pieces through the plagiarism tool of if you just put the raw output from AI tools. We're approaching the top of the hour. I want to appreciate everyone who participated on the podcast today. This has been an awesome conversation. I want to remind everyone, and I just want to give a shout out to the Agile Alliance because I just had a conversation with them. It looks like they're going to, it's not 100% yet, but it looks like they're going to renew their sponsorship coming into 2025, which is cool because that's going to help to keep the lights on. If you'd like to also participate and be a part of our community, again, become a supporting member of New Agility, which is the social enterprise that does this podcast. You can go visit New Agility. You can go through the acnpodcast.org link and see what the rest of the things that are there. But please go over there and look. Every dollar helps us to keep the show going and keeping it alive. It's not a profit thing. It's really literally just how do we pay for the webinar system and all of that. Our next event is going to be Friday, November 22nd. And I didn't announce it fast enough last time, but there will be a newsletter going out. If you've registered for any of the live events, you'll be automatically added to that subscription. And we will have a holiday party in December, just to get together and just, wear funny hats and just chat and talk about what a great year 2024 has been. Or if the year sucked, we can also just say this sucked. But let's look at the bright side of things. So that holiday party announcement will be going out sometime next month. Also, like I said, November 22nd will be the last live event recording session for the ACN for the year. We will do a December podcast, but it's typically with a smaller group of people, and we will go and pick some topic that we think is going to be good for people to hear about. I hope all of you have a tremendous month and see you in November. The ACN podcast is for educational and informative use only. If you'd like to know more about the ACN community, please come up to acnpodcast.org and support our show.